All right, back to Reacts. The next video that we're going to watch is from Citizen Ryan, Reclaiming Gravity, a tactile and scalable vision for the future salvage gameplay in Star Citizen. The reason I was interested in this video is the thumbnail. The title in the thumbnail is Salvage is at risk of becoming mining. These changes could help, as if mining is a bad thing. And I see a lot of these comments a lot, and I think mining's in a really good place and really fun. But a lot of people don't feel that way for some reason. So people don't like to think, I guess. They like the more mindless gameplay, but let's see what he has to say.
There is a way that I think we can use the mechanics that are in the game to make Salvage engaging and tactile gameplay without it becoming a clone of mining. Hey everybody.
Okay, maybe he just doesn't want it to be a mining clone because that would be more boring. That actually sounds more like it.
I'm Ryan, aka Citizen Ryan, and welcome to my channel. I want to talk about structural salvage. So Star Citizen in 3.22 has finally brought to us the first implementation of structural salvage. Now this was met with a lot of praise from people really excited that this feature is finally in, including myself, but also a lot of criticism about the simplicity of the implementation. And I kind of agree with both of these. So when we look at the current implementation of salvage, what are some of the problems that we see? Number one, salvage should encourage teamwork, and right now on the Reclaimer, the claw plays no part in the hull scraping, and the beam operators play no meaningful role in the fracturing or disintegration piece. Secondly, with the current implementation of the fracture and disintegration features, there's no tactile feeling involved. It's a bit anticlimactic too. When the disintegration mode is activated, basically these ships are Thanos'd out of midair and the little particles go flying through space across quite large distances right into the claw of the ship. Now just to get this out of the way, there's a lot of people who think that this physical claw that has been replaced is going to come back in the future with Maelstrom. I don't see that happening either. See it that way. Looking at the dev responses and the videos, I interpret that as something they wish they could have done, but they're going to go down this road instead. So to you guys who think it's going to come back, I hope you're right. But for the purposes of this video, that's...
Even if it does come back, what was the point? Does it, well, unless it physically breaks things, but at least in the video that they showed of it grabbing and pulling it towards something, what is it even pulling anything towards, right? So
not going to be a part of the equation. When I see the salvage loop, I know that they're going to iterate upon it and make it better. My concern right now is that the trajectory is it will be another mining loop where you have to keep a parameter in the green in order to fracture and disintegrate a ship. So in my head, I have a solution that I want to get out there into the world about how within the limitations of the engine and what they can do today, we can make a loop that's engaging, encourages teamwork, feels really tactile, and is just a different loop from mining. So I'm going to walk through each of the steps of that, and you're going to have questions about it. So we're going to go through a second time, and I'll explain every change that I made to the loop and talk about how I think that could happen in the verse. I'm not a game dev. My degree is from watching around the verse, but still, I think it's an interesting idea. So if you're down for that, let's go ahead and get started.
I've seen this guy in my chat, and like maybe in Discord as well, but I'm really liking him so far. I think he seems really down to earth and just like, hey, I want salvage to be more fun. I think we all know it's not in a really good place right now, but this is what I think it should be. And I like the idea of it not being a mining clone, because to be honest, it kind of even is going in that direction already. And yeah, we just would like some, I personally would like some more creativity. You would sub to him? All right, well, hold on. One thing I didn't do at the beginning was link the video, so I'll link that real quick.
So let's start with what makes Salvage Salvage inside of Star Citizen. Well, for one, it's not just another game loop where you sit in a chair and you keep a parameter in the green so something doesn't explode in your face. Instead, it's much more of a relaxing gameplay loop, kind of like a power washing simulator, where it's all about efficiency and diminishing returns and how you choose to...
This isn't Salvage, though. This was the first component of Salvage. Hull scraping. Salvage would be the category, and then hull scraping, structural salvage, and whatever else they do would be the subcategories. This is a subcategory he's describing, and the subcategory of hull scraping is chill and should be chill. At first, I didn't think it should be, but it is very good. I don't, it's obviously we're 2 minutes into a 13-minute video. I'm sure he's going to get into this, but I very quickly want to say, I don't think hull scraping should change at all. I think it should be very similar to what it is. Everything else, I feel like, needs to change a bit. And the reason why is this is a resource extraction gameplay feature. And if mining is mining, which is a resource extraction gameplay feature and has the skill that's involved with it, the danger that's involved in it, if we're going to be extracting similar materials, which I do think we're going to, then this feature has to compare to that and has to have similar risk to similar reward. The risk and reward have to be the same. Otherwise, why would you mine or why would you salvage if they're not somewhat equal, right? The way you interact with the features should not be equal. They should feel different. But right now, I think the biggest problem with salvage is, money per hour is just insanely high. And what I want them to do is realize that these are resource extraction gameplay features, and though, they need to be similar to each other in terms of effort and time to extract those resources. Should there be unique resources to each of those features? Yes. But it does sound like there will be similar ones as well between the two. Like, I can't imagine us not extracting titanium from a ship, right? Things like that
is going to affect what your profit is going to be. It's also very tactile. So even though you may not be physically touching something else, you're having a direct feeling like you are working on something. Hull scraping, which is the first phase of salvaging, really is a good example of this, where although your character is not physically in contact with the target ship, they're controlling the salvage beam exactly where it goes and ripping the hull off of it. So it accomplishes both of these things at once. These are two things that we want to make sure we keep inside of the salvage loop as it's getting developed.
Yeah. This is where he...
Now, some of this you're going to have to use your imagination because not all these mechanics exist, and I did my best to use in-game assets to demonstrate them. A crew on board a reclaimer take a salvage mission and travel there together. The pilot takes the...
It's kind of funny that he went to the Hammerhead cleanup mission, like the biggest culprit of the problem with salvage right now.
Reclaimer and faces the target ship. The claw operator activates the claw, extending it to just a few feet away from the target ship. The claw operator then activates a short-range, very powerful gravity field, locking the target ship in its grasp. The two beam operators then use their choice of salvage beam to begin stripping the hull from the target ship. To allow the beam operators to continue to scrape at full efficiency, they communicate with the claw operator, who's able to use the gravity field, not the claw itself, to rotate, slide, and to a very limited extent push and pull the target
I like
ship,
the slide idea,
exposing the best angles to the beam operators. Once the crew is satisfied with their scraping, they get ready to fracture the target ship. The claw switches.
Do you know what I hope? And this would be a good way of I think I just figured out like the in-lore reason to hull scrape before structural salvage, and that would be that the hull is keeping the structural integrity of the ship together, so you can't break it with the sound waves. You can't do that until enough, a large enough percentage of the hull has been removed to be able to break it into pieces using the sound wave thing. Would probably make the most sense. I think a lot of people want that to be a feature. I've seen that recommended so many times where a citizen here said, hey, when the beam operators are happy with how much salvage they've taken. Well, this should never be exclusively about profit, right? This should be, again, it is a resource extraction feature. That would be like mining in an MMO. That would be like logging in an MMO. That would be like harvesting, farming, that kind of stuff. You go out in the world and you go looking for things that you need to create other things. And in this case, you should want to hull scrape because that material is going to be useful for you somewhere else. But I think we've noticed that that is not enough. Like even putting it at the insane price that RMC is at today, it is not enough to incentivize players to do it because of how time consuming it is. So in order to get the goodies that are inside the ship, you should have to use or break a certain percentage or remove a certain percentage of the hull off in order to just simply be able to, right?
To fracture mode. The claw operator maneuvers the target ship to expose the game's predetermined fracture seams to the beam operators. The beam turrets switch into a new cutting mode. In this mode, the turrets exert a huge amount of force onto one single point, which causes any hull it comes in contact with to be pushed away, unless that hull is clamped by the gravity field of the claw. The beam operators begin to trace the fracture seams with their cutting lasers, causing them to weaken. When the team is ready, the claw operator activates the fracture gravity pulse on the target ship, splitting it along the weakened seams into the game's predefined segments. The crew now gets ready to compact the fragmented segments.
And I hope before we do any of this, the most important part of salvaging would be going inside the ship, removing the components that are useful, taking the very valuable atmosphere that's there, the fuel, the water, the food, whatever, you know, rare items, all that stuff. Like in reality, you need that feature more than anything because Star Citizen is restricting players to certain ships to be able to do certain things. But players, I've noticed, don't really like that restriction. They want to be able to salvage without having to do this stuff. The people who enjoy doing this stuff will do this stuff, right? I'm the type that really likes taking a vulture out, really likes taking a reclaimer out, really likes taking a prospector out. I'm that type. But if you're in need of something, you know, you're looking for something specific, looking for cargo ships, you know, that are salvageable or whatever, could be that option as well, right? So yeah, I would like to, before we started anything, make the need to board a ship more useful, but I think that's probably could be go without saying, right? That should be the most important part. And obviously the discussion of the video is just trying to make structural salvage more interesting, right? And I think he's got a really good point. I think most of us I don't think his idea is very unique to himself. I think a lot of people felt it should somewhat be like this use the beams to break the ship. You know?
Beam operators switch to their tractor beams, and the claw operators switch to compacting mode. When a beam operator uses the tractor beam to draw a segment into the range of the claw's gravity field, the claw operator can then click on that segment, starting compaction. The claw charges and then releases a compacting force on that segment in its range. As the fragmented segment is compacted, it is converted into a number of scrap entities, the size and shape of SCU containers depending on how much material was in that segment.
Oh, I disagree with that completely. They should not look like SCU containers, but I know where he's going. I think I know where he's going here. And I think that this is where a lot of people would want to go. And without pre-watching the video, here's what I'm guessing is going to happen. The claw will suck those container-shaped things to itself, and since that claw has the grinder at the front, it would grind in like a sander or something on a piece of wood, just and then in, and then you actually see something going inside the ship, right?
Once the segments have been compacted, or when the crew is ready, they enter munching mode. The beam operators get their tractor beams, and the claw operator enters munch mode. When a scrap entity is tractored into the gravity field of the claw, The claw operator then clicks on that scrap and an animation takes over, funneling the scrap rectangle into the grinder located on the claw. As the scrap transits into the claw, it's converted by the reclaimer into the construction material commodity. This is repeated until all of the scrap entities are gone.
And we got to all be in agreement here, right? I think we're all in agreement, but let me know what you guys think. I don't think just RMC and just construction materials should be the things that get created. Even in the roadmap page, it said these would be turned into refinable materials. Construction materials are already sound refined, right?
Or until the ship's buffer is full and needs to be emptied. This approach to salvage scratches the itch for tactile and teamwork-based gameplay while staying within the limits of the engine.
Whatever makes sense.
Okay, so I'm sure there's a lot of questions and possibly comments that are going to come from this saying, hey, CIG is not going to do a bunch of rework. And I completely agree with you. For the same reason I think the physical claw is gone and won't come back with Maelstrom, I don't think they're going to be going back and doing a bunch of changes, making new stuff for this loop. So I want to go back and address the changes that are in there and how I think they could be done with existing technology. Again, I'm not a game dev, so I could be very wrong. And if you see something that's blocking it, go ahead and put that in the comments. I want to learn, and maybe somebody knows something I don't know and that you don't know too. So let's have a discussion about that. So let's walk back through.
Discussions in YouTube
so the
comments,
first thing in this loop that's different is that the claw operator gets a gravity field. Now there's two reasons for this. Number one, this gravity field is really just a reuse of the existing tractor beam. However, it would be a bespoke tractor beam that has an extremely limited range and is very strong. Very similar to how the Vulture operates right now, just making the Reclaimer a 3-person team instead of the 2-person beam operated crew. Secondly, why gravity I think makes a lot of sense is the Reclaimer has a giant glowing spinning gravity ball exposed as like a main feature on the interior. So leaning into gravity not only makes sense for the ship, but also for the capabilities of a claw and holding something tightly,
Don't all the large ships have that gravity thing?
Splitting objects by slamming it with a gravity pulse wave, compacting them down into scrap, and finally holding and drawing that scrap into the grinder located on the front of the claw. So the second major change to this loop is the addition of the cutting beam. Now, I don't know the amount of work that it would really take to go into this, but I imagine that a couple things would have to happen. Number one, we would have to mark up the target ships with the seams that could receive the weakened flag after a cutting beam's gone across, and also the beam itself would have to be made. There's some good news in that a cutting beam animation already exists on the multi-tool, so if that was able to be added to the turret, I think you have the makings of what is essentially going to be a weakening beam for the turret. In order to make...
And do you know what's also cool about that? Is that the cutting beam that he just showed also could become useful on like very small ships. Like think about cutting up a Grey Cat Rock or an Aurora or something. Like a player can do that themselves, sort of thing. And yeah, it would be cool to maybe have some sort of a handheld munching capabilities as well or something, right? For the real small stuff.
All really useful in the fracturing mode. This cutting beam, I imagine, would have an extremely strong pushing force. So that way, it only wants to hit items that are locked into the claw. If you hit something else, it would go spinning away. And that really makes the claw important. But also, you could put a radius around this cutting beam that would destroy any unscraped hull, which really leans into the whole efficiency versus diminishing returns and how the crew chooses to operate without like a huge penalty, but just needing to weigh those pros and cons. So we don't know what Maelstrom's going to look like, but it does seem like...
I still think there should be a penalty of cutting like across a fuel line or something. Like if you don't cut on the line and you cut like near the power plant, it's going to blow the ship up and kill you, right?
Like this cutting beam, which is a large force being applied to a single point, would play really nicely with it in the future, because Maelstrom is all about two forces being applied to a joint to see if that joint's going to crack or not. So theoretically, if you ran this beam across a ship, you could either weaken the joints there to then be broken by that pulse wave,
yeah, I like that idea,
just slice right through the ship because of the large force being applied. So I don't know, but it seems like it could expand pretty well with that. And lastly, this needs to have UI associated with it. Now, it would probably take some work to do. The last piece of this fracture seam element I didn't touch on in the first loop, but it's something that would help address the possibility of griefing with the fracture mechanic. Right now, CIG has it where if the power plant is on, you cannot fracture, so it has to be off. The problem is those can be turned off pretty easily with distortion weapons. So what I suggest with this loop is that you can fracture a ship without cutting the seams first, but it would require a lot more energy, which would cause any power plant that's installed in a ship to explode. This explosion would be very clearly marked on the UI, like, hey, if you do this, it will explode. It's not like mining where you messed up and it exploded, but you clearly made the decision to do this. Now, if you did, it would not destroy.
Can I take his idea, but do the exact, but apply it to the reclaimer instead? Like the potential griefer in this scenario, where if you are going to fracture a ship without breaking the pieces up very much, then it would take so much power that the ship is basically rendered inoperable, or no power plant can do it without breaking a little bit first, right? Like the reclaimer cannot possibly produce enough power even through engineering. Or like maybe you got to shut down life support and all sorts of other shit just to be able to do it, to make it like possible but not worth
the reclaimer and wipe out everything you have, but it would at least
turn off your
take out the
defenses
claw in the arm there. So now if I'm a griefer, I have to weigh that decision of, hey, do I want to lose my claw? Am I really into this? Is it worth that to me? Or do I need to now spend the time to weaken the seams first before I actually go through with my griefing? So it makes it take more time, and I think it's one extra step that could be implemented to prevent the griefing in the first place. Not to mention, this adds one more decision element for the salvage crew. Do they want to send a team over into the subject ship and remove all the components before they get into the fracture mode? Or do they want to weaken the seams and get on with structural salvage?
I mean, that's where all the value really should be.
Something I love about this loop is it takes the disintegration piece and it kind of converts that into two separate phases. One where the segment is converted into piles of scrap, and a second where those piles of scrap are taken into the reclaimer and converted into construction materials. So this solves a couple different problems. One, right now, when you dissolve an 890 jump that's huge, you don't have enough room in your buffer for it, so a lot of that material is just lost. Plus, the remote disintegration doesn't carry that same tactile feeling as compacting something. The problem with compacting is it's really similar to what we saw in the ISC from a few weeks ago, where you have this giant piece trying to be converted into a bunch of little entities, and
No, you convert it into larger entities, like compacted just one square. I think he's right.
Took way too long. I think this solves that problem because
I really like
all
this
that
idea.
Material can be logically condensed down by this gravity field into shapeable, fewer number of entities. You could even say if there was too much material or too many entities being spawned, that you could then have an upgrade path where your claw could be upgraded with a stronger compactor, and that could put more SU material into the same size. But it allows multiple reclaimers to work together because you can compact that one into all the entities and then start munching those away. You can even snap those entities to a grid if you wanted to and fly them away and sell them like regular scrap if you wanted to. Now, the munching part, it's not physical munching, okay? It is not Maelstrom. It is actually just an animation. So what would happen is when that piece got drawn up to right where that claw is, as soon as you click, the animation takes over. That rectangle goes right to the middle, starts being drawn in and crunched away by the grinder. But what's really happening is that entity is just despawned and this animation plays out, and it's done just like it is right now in the disintegration mode, except it can look a little more logical. That's pretty much it. Again, do I think CIG is going to do this? No. Am I a game designer? Absolutely not. But I just have this loop in my head, and I love the idea, so I want to put it out there. I want to see your comments. You can prove...
To me, it's the best example of it still being chill, but having enough steps to be better. I still think that there needs to be some risk, though. Just
prove me wrong and tell me why it's not going to work, or you can agree with me. I'm curious to see what you guys think, and if this is not possible or you don't like this idea, I would love to know what your idea is, and for the sake of conversation, throw the engine out the window. I want to know what you would want to see in Salvage. So whether or not you agreed with me on Salvage, I want to thank you for watching to the end of this video.
It
If you
also
enjoyed
seems
feel
very
free to leave a
doable
like
as well,
and subscribe for more. It took a
doable
long
for them
time
and
to
us.
make and would not have been possible
things.
without the incredible community of Star Citizen and on this channel, especially Denny, who literally put in hours to get the reclaimers you saw on screen. If you want to join us in the verse and work on future videos, the link to my Discord is in the description below. Until next time, I'll see you in the verse.
Yeah, that was a good video, man. That's the first one I've seen from him. He posted the video himself in the React channel as well, so I think he was pretty excited to hear what I thought about it. And yeah, man, I think it's a pretty good idea. I like the idea of the compaction and creating smaller like entities of the ship. They still contain all of the material that piece would have, but it's a more manageable thing, and it's a step that comes into place that is you feel what you want from a reclaimer crew. You notice he didn't really use the vulture too much in his examples, because the reclaimer is probably the big example of where things don't work very well, is because you want everybody involved, and it feels like once structural salvage came in, like when the best example of like when the reclaimer was at its best was when hull scraping came in, right? Because you have both beam operators, you can have a pilot moving around, and you have somebody down in the cargo bay moving the boxes. Everybody was doing something all the time, right? There was never a downtime and a sit around do nothing time until structural salvage came. And then you just kind of disintegrate stuff, and the person in the cargo bay has so much going on that everybody's down in the cargo bay while the ship just stands still, right? And it's just moving boxes around. It's almost as if the game mechanic got less interesting, less involved. So anything that adds all these steps, where he made sure that every single player in the ship was doing something, that was good. I think that was the best thing. I think the cargo bay probably hangs tight for a little bit as you refill your buffer. But other than that, I think it's like the most involved explanation that also made sense, that also seems doable, that I've seen from anybody. So really good video. That was Citizen Ryan. I once again will link the video because, I mean, he's got like 4,000 subs on YouTube. I've never seen a video from him personally, but I really like what I've seen so far, so pretty sick. Thanks, Ryan.